there's a story going around about this proposal for a new way of teaching math, primarily a new way of teaching math to black kids, although I'm sure this has implications to teaching math to all kids. And it is a proposal that is very much, very much being embraced, or at least being looked at carefully in the state of Oregon. Oregon, the state in which Portland is a major city, so not too surprising how leftist and nutty they are. A proposal that is being reviewed seriously in Oregon in terms of an anti-racist way of teaching mathematics. Now, just to give you a quick review of anti-racism, anti-racism is the view that basically all white people are racists, and whether they know it or not, whether they admit it or not, whether they act in any kind of explicitly racist way or not, because the institutions, the structure, the infrastructure, the world in which we live is inherently racist. And that the only way to overcome racism is basically to completely and completely dismantle all the social, political, economic institutions that exist today, because all of them were created by white people with the goal and the effect of suppressing black people. And that is the essential characteristic of the world in which we live. And that colorblindness is racist, because they would argue you cannot be colorblind because you're inherently racist, and because color does matter. So to be colorblind is to evade and deny reality. And that we are all, as if you're white, collectively responsible for the racism of the past. And if you're black, you're collectively a victim of the racism of the past, whether you have suffered any racism or not as an individual. So it is a racist, collectivistic, anti-civilization, particularly Western civilization, anti-capitalist, anti-freedom, really, view of looking at the world, which turns every question, every issue, into an issue of race. Because every issue, every question has been answered by certain people. Those certain people had a particular skin color, therefore a particular race according to their definition of race. And therefore, whatever answers they gave were not related to truth. Indeed, truth, objective truth doesn't exist. Truth and your answers can only be understood in the context of the race to which you belong, the color of the skin you happen to have. So it is a system that denies objective reality. It's a system that basically is a racist system in the sense that it judges people not by the content of their character or the content of their minds, not by whether they are pursuing truth or not. It judges them based on whether they're white or black or green or yellow or purple. They are determined. We are all determined by our race, whether we know it or not, whether we'll admit it or not. Right? So it's a completely deterministic theory that says that you as an individual don't matter, don't count, or insignificant. You're basically determined by the collective to which you happen to be brought into, a collective that is determined by your belonging, is determined by the color of your skin. Right? Now, what does this have to do with math? Well, not only does it have to do with math, it has to do with pedagogy generally. It turns out that most of the math we study as we study it, was discovered by white people, white men particularly. Now, not all of it. Like the concept of zero, the idea of zero, was actually discovered in India and used in India. Then the Arabs or the Muslims learned of it, transferred it to the Middle East. The Arabs used the concept of zero. And the Europeans learned about zero, and therefore the decimal system, from the Arabs in, I think, the time of Aquinas in the 1300s, 1200s or 1300s, came in from Arabia, but again discovered by some mathematicians in India. Well, a lot of Arab mathematicians, I think India during that period or pre that period, in the early part of the BC era, there was quite a bit of mathematics going on there. Remember, India was impacted by Greek philosophy, as was much of that part of the world, because of Alexander the Great's conquests. And of course, Alexander was a pupil of Aristotle and brought much of those ideas to places like Iran and to the outskirts, or at least the borders of India. But there was math in India. Of course, the Greeks had mathematics, but the Greeks are viewed as white. Who knows what ethnic group they belonged to, or what exactly the composition of their genes was. There's some evidence to suggest that the ancient Greeks were not related to the Greeks of today. That in spite of the pride the Greeks today have in the ancient Greeks, they're not the same people. Well, you shouldn't have pride in your ancestry. That's the easiest way to get around it. But it turns out that, I don't know, Leibniz and Newton, the discoverers of calculus, were white men. And most of the discoveries over the last 300, 400 years in mathematics was a product of people who happen to be European and happen to be men. That makes math biased. That makes math be a reflection of reality, as seen by somebody with a particular skin tone. And somebody with a different skin tone might actually see math differently. That is, 1 + 1 might not actually be 2. Now, it's obviously 2 to me because, my skin tone is kind of bright, but maybe if my skin tone was darker, it would. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that white supremacists usually talk about. And indeed, white supremacists, I think, would celebrate this new, let me see, what's it called? I've got the document in front of me. It's called A Pathway to Equitable. Notice the word equity again? Notice the word equity? To equitable, we've talked about this before and how they've used now equitable, equity, in other words, fairness, morality, in everything that they do in this new egalitarian culture. They don't talk about equality, they talk about equitable. A pathway to equitable math instruction. Dismantling racism in mathematics instruction. Now, who knew? I didn't know that there was racism in mathematical instruction. I mean, probably the biggest tragedy of this, no, not the biggest tragedy. The biggest tragedy is the kids who are actually going to have to study this stuff. But one of the big tragedies of all of this is that when you read this stuff, you go, if this is racism, racism is garbage. If this is what they consider white supremacist, then there is no white supremacist. And that, I think, is tragic and sad, because I do believe there is such a thing as racism. I do believe there are racists in America. I do believe that not just these kind of racists, the anti-racist racists, but white supremacists. I think white supremacy is alive and well in the United States. I think that, white nationalism and the alt-right are alive and well and have grown in power and grown in influence and grown in numbers over the last, 20 years. But when you read this stuff, when you read this as a response to racism, all this will do is cause many people to dismiss racism as a problem that doesn't, as a non-existent problem. And it'll turn some people into racists. Because this stuff is really, really, really bad. And if you take it seriously, whether you're white or you're black, you're going to become a racist of one kind or another. And yes, white supremacy is alive and well. You saw it in Charlottesville. You saw it all over the place. All over the place. You saw it on January 6th in the mob attack on the Capitol. You saw people there wearing white supremacist, anti-Semitic T-shirts and slogans and all of that. And it wasn't like the crowd shunned them. Not that I'm saying the whole crowd was racist, but it's not like the crowd said, oh, you guys, we don't want to be with you guys. You guys are racist. We don't want to have anything to do with racists. No, they marched along with them. They hung out with them. It was quite notable. And it's alive and well, and it's big, and it's significant. And if you deny it, you're part of the problem. You really are part of the problem. But the solution, of course, is not this anti-racist racism. So let's look at this. Now, this is the thing about math. For the most part, and granted, there are plenty of philosophers, I'm sure, and philosophical theories out there that deny objectivity completely and reject the whole notion of objectivity and reject the whole notion of reality and our ability to know reality, and therefore view math as just an arbitrary construct of our minds. And therefore, by the way, open up completely to this idea of black math versus white math versus whatever math. But for the most part, relative to every other realm of human knowledge, math is typically a realm in which people accept the idea of objectivity, the idea of truth, the idea of right and wrong answers. And more than that, most people get that math is practical. You can add money, you can subtract money, you can do that at the cash register, and it's practical. And it works. And everybody pretty much acknowledges it. And nobody goes to cash register saying, you know, you gave me too little change because I'm, you know, I think 2 + 2 = 27, so therefore I should get X. And nobody does that. Nobody lives that. Pretty much people accept the objectivity of addition and subtraction. And they understand that buildings are built, you know, with math. And to the extent that they don't fall down, it depends on how good the math is. Spaceships are launched into space with math. And they accept generally that is an objective, there's an objective standard there that helps prevent the spaceship from just crashing. So math is the one realm that epistemologically, seems to be a general view that, yeah, this reflects reality, this reflects truth, this is workable, this actually functions in reality the way it's supposed to. Now, it's more than just math. People don't cross the street saying, well, who knows if the car's coming or not. You know, it could be just a mirage. I could be a brain in a vat, and therefore nothing will happen to me. Nobody actually does that. Generally, in day-to-day life, people act as if knowledge is objective and reality is real. A is A. And things act according to some, you know, causal factors. Get hit by a car, you're going to suffer. People get this. Right? But of the intellectual pursuits, math, even more than science, you get debates, right? You get debates about evolution, you know, not legitimate debates, but you get debates. People disagree about evolution. You get debates about physics. I mean, there are even flat earthers out there, though it's not even worth mentioning them because that is so absurd. But you get debates about physics. But in terms of day-to-day, the kind of math that kids learn in school, there really isn't a debate. There's no creationism as applied to math. There's no, flat earthers when it comes to math. Well, except there is now, it turns out. And it's right here in this document that is being supposedly taken seriously in the state of Oregon and might be applied in some schools. And even if it's not applied in the state of Oregon, this is an approach, this is an attitude that academics are encouraging people, school boards, school superintendents, curriculum committees, an attitude that people are being encouraged to take. So here's what they say. And this is under the guise of dismantling white supremacy in math classrooms. We see white supremacy culture show up in the mathematics classroom, even as we carry out our professional responsibilities outlined in the California Standards of Teaching Profession. Using these standards, a framework, we see white supremacy culture in the mathematics classroom can show up when. So these are places in which white supremacy shows up. Now, you would think that this would say something like black kids are discouraged from taking math classes. Black kids are graded differently than white kids. Hispanic kids are told that they don't know any math and to go study English or something. I don't know. You'd think that those would be the things that they identify as signs of white supremacy in the math classroom. No. I mean, those are obviously racist type of things, but it's not what the anti-racists are concerned with. Maybe because it's really, really rare that teachers would say stuff like that in the world in which we live in today. 50 years ago, very prevalent. But in the world today, while I think white supremacy is on the rise and growing, it's still in the underground. It's still considered something that you don't really talk about, and certainly not something you would express in a classroom. So what do they view as expressions of white supremacy in the classroom, in mathematics classroom? Well, the number one thing they cite is, and I'm reading straight out of their document, the focus on getting the right answer. I mean, I'll let that sink a little bit. The focus on getting the right answer is in their view, a sign that there's white supremacy around. The focus is on getting the right answer. Now, this is the thing about math. There's a right answer, and there's a wrong answer. 2 + 2 = 4. It doesn't equal 5. Now, yes, you can create circumstances where, in a different context, 2 + 2 = 1. Right? Like in set theory, in particular mathematical constructions, where the plus sign means something else and the 1 or the 2 means something else. But then it's on you to explain the construct. 2 + 2 = 4 in math, in straight addition, in the way all of us understand what 2e means and what another 2 means. If you're changing the context, which you can, and you do in mathematics, it's on you to explain that context. Now, this is not just an undermining of, the whole idea of math education. This is undermining of education, period. Undermining of reason, of logic, of our senses, of our ability to think. Not only is there a right answer in math, but there are right answers in almost every field. Reality is what it is. It's not subject to your genes. It's not subject to your whim. It's not subject to your wishes. There is a right answer. Is this an iPhone? There's a right answer to that. Yes, it is. It's not a Samsung. Every day, you have to make decisions about what's right and what's wrong, what's right and what's false. To breed in kids, and we're talking about primary school kids, the skepticism of reality, of existent, is just plain evil and wrong and epistemologically unbelievably destructive of the child's ability to ever think again. If you want to create a class of students who cannot think, a class of members of society who cannot add, who cannot think, who cannot be logical, who cannot reason, this is the way to do it. And if you're teaching this to black kids, then you can create a class of black kids who can't do this. Wow. And who are you hurting? Is any white supremacist going to care if black kids are taught that there's no such thing as getting an answer right? No, of course not. They're going to celebrate.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right, all right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it. But at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share. And you can support the show at YourOnBookShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.